episode number 178 of Sunday Golds, a Florida State baseball podcast. Ariya Masudi, Brett Nevitt, and joined shortly here by Bradley Smart of D1 Baseball. A lot to get to, I think, in this episode. Brett, you and I took last week the second episode off with some scheduling things, and again, a lot for us to, I think, jump into with Florida State, who went over 4 this week. And it's a tough week, right, with a good schedule that they've been playing and a gauntlet they've been in right now. You knew this week would be amongst the toughest they've had, playing the Gators, who are now playing phenomenal baseball. And they've had an up and down year themselves, but so much talent, and it's only a matter of time before they get that right. And then Georgia Tech, who might have a case for the best team in the country, and I think has a legitimate argument for that. So we'll have Bradley on here in about 10, 15 minutes to join us to talk the weekend and the ACC as a whole. But I wanted to jump in to this weekend and get right into it, so we're not on here for an hour and 15 minutes. But Alumni Hall, Metro Deli, we appreciate you guys sponsoring this podcast and being friends of the program. I do want to shout you guys out, and of course the fans who've been listening, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever else you might get Sunday Golds. We appreciate you. But Brett, what are your thoughts, macro, 30,000 feet in the air, on the week that was for Florida State when they went 0-4 and fell to the Gators and the Jackets?
Yeah, I think every season has kind of that week where at some point you're in a valley and you have just a really bad week, and it caught up to FSU this week, and played 2 really good teams in Florida and Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech obviously really impressive, and having to go up to Atlanta in second straight week with a Thursday to Saturday series. Definitely some concerns over the offense, both presently and long term, of what it can do and what it can be. And I just feel like your margin for error as a team is pretty small, and you saw that pop up in the first 2 games where you stuck your nose in there for the first 2 games, but just weren't able to get it done. And then obviously game 3 just got away from you. But yeah, your margin for error is going to be small, but I think reason for optimism would be the schedule coming up. It should be easier than the schedule that you've had these first 5 weeks of ACC play, I think. The last 2 weeks, I think, will be tough with going to Clemson and having Miami at home, but it is going to get easier than what it has been these last few weeks. And I think that will be big for them right now to gain some confidence back, specifically as an offensive unit.
Yeah, I think everybody had the gut feel when Miles Bailey went down that this would be a challenge at some point. I go back to, even with Miles Bailey, I think this would have been the toughest week of Florida State's season. The Noles could have been fully healthy, and I'm not sure they would have gone into Atlanta and been able to take 2 out of 3 against Georgia Tech. Would they have had a better shot? Most definitely. I think anybody with Miles is a better baseball team. And I don't want to take credit away from what I think the Yellow Jackets are. I think the way Florida State lost, that's something you and I need to dive into, because especially game 1 is frustrating when you play that well in certain respects to have yourself a chance to have a result on the road against Georgia Tech. But game 2 and game 3, I just thought that's a really good lineup that wore you down throughout the weekend and found ways to really do to you what they've done to everybody for most of the season. And that's, they pick and prod, and they find ways to get starting pitchers out of ball games, and then they really do key in and find ways to be effective. And then the avalanche effect, because that lineup is, man, it's good. Getting to talk to James Ramsey this weekend about how they constructed that, and the job that he's doing in Atlanta has been really impressive. But when Bradley comes on here, we'll talk more about, his thoughts on Georgia Tech and the ACC. But we'll keep, this segment with you and me focused on Florida State. Do you worry about this offense? 3 runs in 4 straight games. Seems like they've been stuck on that number, and it's come in different ways, right? They've actually run the ball out of the ballpark this week. I think they hit, 7 home runs in the 4 games when you combine Florida and Georgia Tech? That's not an area that I thought they would be able to have success in post Miles Bailey. And they've shown you the ability to run some balls out of the yard, but they're not stringing hits together, right? And that's the one thing that stood out to me about Georgia Tech was, with 2 outs in an inning, they can string 5 hits together back to back to back to back, right? And all of a sudden you feel like you're 1 pitch from getting out of the inning, and then you look up and they put up a 10 spot. And that's just kind of what they do. And that's something Florida State has not shown the ability to do without Miles Bailey. And I don't know that you need 10-run innings, but it'd be nice to put up a 3 or 4 spot every now and then to really put the pressure on opposing teams.
Yeah, I think you had one crooked number put up the whole weekend, and that was the 3 runs you scored early in that first game off Tate McKee. And outside of that, they scored, 1 run was the max they scored in an inning. And it's a weird weekend when you hit 6 home runs, but you only score 9 runs. And I think they're just struggling to get on base consistently as an offense. I mean, in the 9 games they've played since Miles has gotten down, they have a 315 OBP as a team. So, I mean, you're reaching base in only 31% of your plate appearances as a team and averaging 4.3 runs per game in those 9 games. But you have homered in 6 straight games, and you've only failed to homer in 2 of the games without him, which I don't think is the thing that we felt like would have stayed consistent. But maybe that is reason for optimism. Maybe you do feel like they start to level out when it comes to guys getting on base. But like when you're just trying to put a 9 together, like it just feels tough right now. Like it just feels like you don't have many guys that you just feel like every day are going to be middle of the order bats and guys that drive in runs. Like it just feels like you're going to have to try to, just scrap your ways to things and small ball and do some running and just find ways to produce offense, because you don't just have like 3 or 4 guys right now that are just going to do that. Like it's just tough when you have that and you're trying to find a couple more guys to really be consistent producers day in and day out, and that's something that they're really searching for right now.
Who are guys that you think fit the bill? I mean, obviously there's no magic or miracle coming for you for this baseball team. There isn't, guys. This isn't Major League Baseball. I had people texting me, well, when the Atlanta Braves lost Ronald Acuna, and they won the World Series, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm a Braves fan. They were able to go and get guys in free agency with trades. It doesn't happen in college baseball. So what you have is what you have. Where does this come from for Florida State? Give me a best case scenario. What trio or quartet of guys do you foresee having to be the ones that carry this mantle if, we look up on May 14th as opposed to April 14th and the Seminoles are still in the thick of it for a hosting spot and dangerous for the postseason?
Yeah, I think your very best case scenario is probably like a 1 through 4 of Chase leading off and playing to his ceiling, Stetzer hitting second and playing to his ceiling, which we saw some of this weekend, but there's still a lot of strikeouts in there. Dowd hitting third and being the consistent bat that you expect to be, and then Carnes hitting fourth and reaching his ceiling as well, and being the run producer and having the power production that we thought that he could have coming into the season. I think that's probably your best case scenario. I mean, there's other guys that if they hit their ceiling too, they could be in there. I mean, Chef potentially, but Chef seems to be struggling at the plate right now. So yeah, I think 1 through 4 with Chase leading off, Stetzer as a freshman starting to find his stride, and maybe you throw Paulino in there as well over Carnes, but I guess Paulino at 5 behind Carnes. That's probably, I think, your best case scenario, and you just hope that Paulino's kind of going through just a freshman year slump, and I think teams are making an adjustment to him with the secondary pitches, and now he just has to make an adjustment back to that. And I still really believe in his offensive talent, and I think he's someone that you'll start to see come back around rather than just tail off. I think that's more so just he needs to start making adjustments to the adjustments.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. To me, it goes back to you will need Carnes to be a consistent for you. You need Chase to be a consistent for you, because those are 2 guys that have shown you they can do it in past years. I also still think Cal Fisher has a heater coming at some point. Now, what that looks like and when that is, I'm not sure, but Stutzer and Paulino are 2 kids. I've always viewed baseball seasons as a bunch of micro stories that form one macro picture right by the season's end. And as you evaluate every weekend, you're also evaluating each player, right, and their arc and how they develop. And I still believe Stutzer and Paulino by the end of May could be 2 of your best players, right, as they get all these at-bats and reps in their first seasons playing college baseball. Miles Bailey last year, you might remember, it was late in the season where the light turned on for him as a freshman, and he ended up being arguably your best hitter to end the year as a rookie, right? And so the Miles Bailey story, I think, peaked last year in his freshman year. What would you say, in the month of May, when he really started getting going? And I think everyone saw what he did in postseason baseball, the ACC tournament and beyond. I'm looking for the same thing from Stutzer and Paulino. Stutzer had a weekend, and it was in front of his family, in front of his friends. I know Georgia Tech offered him. James Ramsey and Danny Hall both told me they badly wanted John Stutzer, who went to Popeye right in the backyard there in Marietta, and they were bummed to lose out, to Florida State. And Stutz, in front of his family and friends, put on a show. I think he hit a couple home runs and he missed a couple home runs by maybe 2 or 3 feet each time. And that was earlier in the weekend. He still shows you that he needs to get many more reps, because there's some challenges of him having not played baseball full time for the last couple of years that you can kind of see out there. And Paulino, I thought, had some good at bats on the weekend. He had the double to left field. Was it in game 3? They're all kind of mushed in my head. I think it was game 3. And then I think it was game 2 that he just barely missed, tying the game, I think, with a home run deep in right center that went back to the wall. So he's shown you some ability there. I'd like to see what happens, with a guy like Braden Dowd. Does he take the next step into superstardom? I think he can. Obviously, it would have been nice if Miles was playing, because then Dowd has the protection of Miles, and maybe they both protect each other, so to speak. But now the focal point of the offense seems to be, from opposing pitching staffs, how to try and pitch to Dowd. Carnes, of course, the talent, as I mentioned earlier. But then, when you get to the bottom of the order for Florida State, can you find something from Putnam? Can you find something from McCulley, who I actually think has given you really good defense at shortstop? I think that's the most comfortable I feel with anybody picking it up right in the infield right now for Florida State is McCulley. And then, so on and so forth, of guys getting opportunities. A Bavaro, can he get some opportunities and go on a heater on his own? Or, does a guy like Brody DeLamielleure get back into the mix somewhere and find a way to provide you some of that experience that, he's been able to have in his career? But the offense doesn't have to be elite. You're not looking for a Georgia Tech level offense that's, one of the best ever in modern baseball history. You're looking for something that can get you 5 or 6 runs, I think. I think 6 runs is a pretty good magic number for Florida State baseball with the way they've pitched. And we can pivot to that a little bit too, Brett. I thought they pitched at a really high level. I thought all 3 starters did a nice job. I know Moore was pulled in game 3 early. We were told that it was precautionary, but he was dealing with something that they didn't feel comfortable running him back out there for a 4th inning after 67 pitches. But I did like what I saw from all 3 guys that began the games this weekend on the Hill.
Yeah, I thought Mendez was actually executing at an extremely high level outside of the slider. It seemed like he just struggled to find the feel for the slider a little bit, which I think led to some of his struggles against the left-handed hitters. I think Baker, one of the left-handed hitters, got him for a solo shot pretty early on. But yeah, I thought West, pitched pretty well. I just thought Georgia Tech's approach against him was really impressive. It just seemed like they were really committed to running his pitch count up and getting him out of the game early and getting Abraham in the game as early as possible, because when you're playing FSU and you're in a close game in game 1 early on, that you probably can eliminate John for the entire weekend. If you can get him in there in the 6th or the 5th or even the 7th, if you can get West out of the game pretty early on. And I think when he allowed 2 runners on in the 6th before he came out, both those guys ended up scoring. But overall, I was pretty encouraged with West in this out, and the fact that he was able to pitch the way he did against that lineup without really having the slider as effective as we've seen it in some of the past outings. I thought he was able to really rely on the changeup at times and get a bunch of swings and misses on the changeup against their right-handed hitters, which was really good to see. I did not get to watch Saturday's game, so I don't have too much on Beard, but I do think something with Beard that I've been noticing watching is sometimes it feels like he's nibbling a little bit and a little afraid to just attack the zone and go in the zone with the fastball changeup combo. So I think with facing some lesser lineups moving forward these next few weeks, you just hope to see more of an attack mentality. And more, yeah, it was interesting to see him come out after the third. You mentioned something going on there, but it sounds like he's going to be okay. But it seemed like that third inning was his best inning, and he was starting to really figure it out against their lineup and command the fastball at a high level again. So, yeah, I was surprised to see him come out. But like Link said, dealing with a little bit of something there. So, yeah, overall, not too concerned about the weekend rotation coming out of this weekend, but I do think you need to see more from Beard. You need to see Beard take a step up. And I do think if Moore hadn't had the injury thing happen on Saturday, I personally definitely would have been thinking about swapping Moore and Beard with the way that the weekend was, because then you wouldn't have had to move Moore up a day. You just would have been going from Saturday to Saturday because of the Thursday to Saturday series. But if he's dealing with something, I don't really know if that's too much of an option.
Yeah, I'm looking at the strikeout numbers just because I remember it catching my eye. I think FSU struck out. The starters had 20 strikeouts against Georgia Tech combined. I think it was 9, 6, and 5 from Mendez, Beard, and Moore, which, I mean, it shows you some effectiveness. That's not an end-all, be-all, obviously. I could also point to the walks, all three guys that Tech did a good job of raising pitch counts. I think Brocious is responsible for like 10 pitches every at bat for anybody who hits against him. And you're like, well, that's one inning less that you're going to pitch because of Parker Brocious. And that's just a credit to what Rammer does. I was talking to some people about how Georgia Tech widens out their stance, right, with 2 strikes, and they get low and they're able to really battle. If you remember, James Ramsey batted the same way. Like at Florida State, he would get low into a wide stance. And so it's not like, if you go back and watch his tape, he's legitimately coaching all these kids to hit the way that he hit. And when you hit like 380 in college and you were a first-round pick, pretty good, I think, platform there to go off of. But impressed by Tech, man. And I think there's more to break down here. So I do want to bring in a friend from D1 Baseball and someone who does excellent work. Bradley Smart, welcome, buddy, to Sunday Golds. Is this the debut, my friend, on this podcast?
This is. I was bummed. I feel like the last few times I've had like a conflict or I've been traveling, so I'm pumped to be here. Love listening to you guys, and obviously love seeing both of you whenever I'm at a Florida State series. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. You do great work. I think anybody who follows your coverage of ACC baseball appreciates what you do. For those, though, who need an introduction to you, who are still growing into the wide net of ACC baseball and what D1 baseball provides, give us a quick synopsis of your role and what's on your plate coming up.
Yeah. So I do a little bit of everything at D1, but primary is ACC Extra. So if you're unfamiliar, we had SEC Extra for a while, which is Mark Etheridge and Joe Healy covering the SEC in depth. Naturally needed to kind of balance it out with some more detailed ACC coverage. So I run that. It's I feel like it's worth the subscription. You get a lot of content throughout the week, and then I'm usually at a ballpark or covering remotely on weekends. And then I'm also co-host of the ACC Baseball Etc. podcast with Darren Vaught, who I know was just on the show as well. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a great league. I mean, I know your listeners know that, but there's just so much every week, especially now that's it's 16 teams, and there's a lot of good teams in the league right now. So it's been a lot of fun.
And we'll get into, I think, this weekend, but I want to piggyback off your comment of the depth of the league. Have you seen a ACC this deep since you've started covering? It feels like we could go into teams 10, 11, and 12 in the league, and I'm not sure we've had, again, this level of competition in this league all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I covered the ACC for a while. I was covering Boston College for a while, and then obviously brought in the scope. But yeah, it feels top to bottom like any weekend, even when you're an elite level team, like up near the top. Like there's 4 teams in our D1 top 10 right now from the ACC, which is the most of any conference, and then you only have one other in the rankings, and a part of that is because everyone keeps beating each other up in like the middle of the pack there. But yeah, I think the depth is astounding, and all of the coaches I've talked to this year have said the same thing. They're like, we don't see any weekend where it's like, yep, we can go in and take this series pretty easily. And so I think even when you look at a Cal who was coming into this week 1-11, they go to Pitt, who's kind of the story of the first half, and they sweep them. And with a pair of run rules. So I just think the talent level is extremely high. And it's been just like, you got really good arms on every staff, it seems. And then you've got really dangerous hitters throughout. And a lot of them are older and veteran guys. And so it's just harder than ever to navigate lineups.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, we're looking at what potentially could we get to double digits of ACC teams make the NCAA regionals? It could be close, I think, when that conversation occurs late in May.
Yeah. I mean, I think the midseason one was, I think it was 10. But it does feel like if you look at the top, there's a ton of host contenders, obviously, and a ton of top 8 contenders as well. And then it's just who sort of runs with, in the second half of the conference schedule, because you just see a bunch of teams kind of lurking. Like you see a Wake at 9-9, you see NC State at 8-7, Miami's 8-7. Like all these teams have just sort of hung around and gone through some slow spots, and it's just like, what does that second half look like? Who plays themselves into safety or who kind of sweats it out on the bubble?
Yeah, it'll be fascinating, I think, too, as this month of April closes out in the next couple of weeks, and then we turn the page to really what I call go time, right? And that's the stretch where every weekend starts to matter, and not just the weekend series. I think wins individually start to really matter because of how they affect RPI, and everybody's jockeying for position there right at the end to have that little advantage, whether it's just to get into the tournament or host or be a top 8 national seed. Those margins become so razor thin that every game does become critical in the month of May. Specifically to this weekend, Bradley, we are a Florida State podcast, so I do want to ask in the scope of Florida State, but I'm going to give you a chance to talk about Tech too. What do you think Florida State should be looking at as they come out of the weekend and as they move forward? Because it really is the first tough weekend they've had in league play, and there's still a lot of baseball left to be played, and they're still in a really good position when you look at ACC standings and RPI. How do you paint that picture for the Noles as they turn the page?
Yeah. And I think I said this coming into the weekend, like it was going to take, kind of a perfect weekend for Florida State to have a chance at winning the series, much less taking a game. Like just when you just compare, it's Florida State's pitching against Georgia Tech's lineup. And if Georgia Tech's lineup won that battle in any of the games, I just didn't feel very confident in Florida State being able to keep up. And they had that chance on Thursday where they're right in it, right there in the end. That's the game. If they were going to steal one, it was going to be that one. And they didn't. But I think in the big picture, they're fine. Like I've said this before, but I think they're up to 6 in the RPI. And if you look at who they played, like who they played to start ACC play, like that was a gauntlet. Like you had Wake on the road, you had NC State, you had Duke, who has been a challenge and obviously took one after that, the injury there. But then you went to Virginia, then you went to Georgia Tech. Like that's as front loaded as it gets. And I said earlier, like you can't look past anyone, but if you're Florida State, you're looking at the Final 5 and you're going, okay, like we have the opportunity to hold ground at the top of the league. When you look at Notre Dame, Stanford, Pitt, Clemson, like they're going to be favored in all of those series. And then the Miami one's going to be really interesting at the end of the year. But I do think with the pitching staff and the execution they showed at times this weekend, that final score on the finales is the ugly one. But I don't think that reflects how Florida State played this weekend. I think that was kind of the inevitable end to the weekend when you kind of look at Florida State staff and sort of how they approach things. And so I don't think that was, it's not fun to end a weekend like that for sure. I'm sure the players were not feeling great after, you have a lead in the middle innings and then you look up and it's a run rule and you're going home. But I think they're going to be fine. And I have a lot of faith in that rotation. Like Wes Mendez looked fantastic. I know he didn't have everything, but he just showed like what a good Friday starter can do in this league against a really difficult lineup. And you look at the balk from John, like if that doesn't happen, we're having a different conversation about that game. And I think, Bryson Moore was a bummer to see him exit because I think he was throwing really well. And then Trey Beard, you just look at it's really like these 2 at-bats in that game. If I'm remembering, he had in that third inning, he got Parker Brocious to ground into a double play, but I think it was like a 10-pitch at-bat, which just that wears you down. You get Drew Burris 2 strikes. You just got to finish him there. Like you got to flip to another inning and feel a bit better. And then, he gets a single and then things unravel. And I think it's like a 4 spot. And so like that, there's just these little moments where it's like, that's why Georgia Tech is where they are. They do this to really high quality arms week in and week out. And it's just, Florida State didn't see the offense to sort of counter that. But I still think I think it's a very talented team. And obviously they have to figure out some things in the lineup. But I do still feel good. And I do think the way the schedule sets up is a huge boost. Like if you looked at them and they had, some of those big series left on the schedule without Miles Bailey, I think we'd be talking about this a lot differently, but they don't necessarily. So I think that's a big positive for them to kind of look at when you're sort of saying, okay, we have a runway to get guys going ahead of, the postseason.
Yeah. Brett, when you look at game 1, and that was the best chance of the weekend for Florida State, right out of the gate, you had your best arm in Mendez do what he needed to do, right, to give you a chance. You got a big swing from Cal Fisher that allowed you to have a lead, right, at 3-0. And you get late into the game, and it's this one-run ball game. You and I have talked about now without Miles that you're going to play in a lot of these close games, right? You're going to play in a lot more 1-run games or 2-run games, which means the margin for error becomes, as I said earlier with the schedule and the ACC teams, razor thin. You've got to execute almost perfectly, like Bradley said, to win these types of games. And they almost did, but almost isn't good enough, especially on the road. Like even if Georgia Tech had come to Tallahassee this weekend, I think maybe Florida State would have had a different opportunity with their home crowd and the momentum and the energy of rattling Georgia Tech's pitching enough to break through for some moments. And maybe FSU walks Georgia Tech off in game 1 at Hauser as opposed to playing on the road and Georgia Tech's crowd being a difference maker in a tight game like that. But I go back to just key moments in that one, right? And the ones that stood out the most came with a couple of chances, I thought, in the middle of the innings when you had some runners on base. I thought McKee did a good job of settling in. But then McKee came out, and I thought Patel didn't have his best stuff, and Florida State had some opportunities there. But then you go to the end, right? And you go first and second, both guys steal, which was gutsy. I mean, I held my breath when both guys ran because I'm like, why are we running on Von Lackey? Don't do this now. Don't get thrown out in the ninth. Ironically, you got thrown out anyway to end the game on a great PFP by Patel. And what do you make of that situation? Because that's not an easy one. I think I've tried to watch the video back 25 different times. I've called every single person that I trust who played the game of baseball and coaches to ask their opinion. I even asked Link at BP the next day what was supposed to happen. So I have a decent idea of what they thought was supposed to happen. I'm curious as to what you thought and what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's a good point that you brought up that they made the double steal to get to third and second. And then the next good point is that Georgia Tech was playing infield back on the corners too. So like a ground ball anywhere but the pitcher is a run. And so that's your number one issue with this play is where the ball ends up off the bat on the very next pitch after the double steal from your captain. That's the number one problem with that play. I think it's just an awkward play for Chase at third because my guess is they're going on contact. But like the way that ball was hit, Patel potentially could have caught it in the air. Like I'm pretty sure it just like skipped into his glove, like it landed on the mound. And if he had just lunged down a little bit farther, like he could have caught it. And based on watching the different angles, because I think one of the Georgia Tech parents posted all the different angles from that play. It looked like Chase was going at first and then stopped. And I'm guessing he stopped, maybe just because it was back to the mound or maybe because he thought Patel was going to catch it. But behind him, Stetzer didn't stop at all, and Stetzer was off on contact. And, that would have forced Chase to go, but I don't think that's the reason Chase went based on the replay of watching the other angles. Like Chase never looked at Stetzer. It looked like Chase bounced forward when the ball was hit. He froze when Patel looked at him. Not even froze. He bounced back when Patel looked at him. And then he went like right after Patel threw. Now, if he doesn't go right away, he probably turns and looks and sees Stetzer's there. And then someone's got to get in a rundown and try to score a run. But obviously the way it broke down, it happened as poorly as it could have happened for you. Like I said, the number one problem with that is the contact and the result of the contact and where it went. in the situation. And I mean, I think Cal got jammed on a fastball, like inside on his hands, it looked like. So I mean, a lot of things went wrong there. I think all three guys did stuff wrong and didn't execute it the way it needed to be executed, because even if they're going on contact, like Stetzer needs to be looking at the runner ahead of him to like make sure that he's going, because it's not like he's going to get thrown out at third base, so he doesn't have to go immediately. But yeah, it was just an awkward play that got screwed up on all three ends and was executed well by Georgia Tech. And in the inning before, you also let off with a double. And you know, I don't remember exactly how they didn't get it done. I think Smelia pinch hit and grounded out to short for the first out, and the next two guys got out without driving him in. I think the reason you don't sack bunt there is because you're not playing for one against Georgia Tech as the road team. Like, you're probably expecting that Georgia Tech's going to score another run in that game. So if you make it 4-4, like, yes, you do tie it, but how many more pitches does John even have left at that point? Do you want to burn another high leverage arm? So I think Link was playing for the lead in the 8th inning, because we have seen them bunt in that situation a bunch of times. And I do think with the offense you currently have, you do need to manufacture runs. But I think the reason they did not bunt there was just because of the nature of Georgia Tech's offense and the nature of how many pitches John had already thrown to that point before going to the bottom of the 8th inning. So, yeah, a lot of stuff happened there in the last couple innings. I mean, the 6th inning is just as frustrating too. Like Bradley said, it's a balk and then an infield single, then a wild pitch and a blooper. And that's how you lose. So it's frustrating last 3.5 innings of the game.
Yeah, and one thing on execution for Georgia Tech, when you sort of compare the two, like in that 6th inning, not only, you know, the infield single, Carson Kurse like flies down the line to beat that out. He then goes first to third on a wild pitch, and it's plays like that where it's you know, it looks like it's just they're so well coached at Georgia Tech, and you can just see that show up time and time again. And if you're not, like, if you can't move a runner over, like you said, like Braden Dowd had the leadoff double, and if you can't move him over with a hit, like a ground out anywhere over, like he hit it right to the shortstop, and it's looks the runner back, makes the play. So it's moments like that really stuck out throughout the weekend, where it's like just a little bit better execution from Florida State, and you see a tighter ball game.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like a counterpoint, just because I remember thinking when Dowd doubled that they should have sack bunted and you're down one. But then my counterpoint would be, if you did find a way to score that run to tie it 4-4, right, in the 8th inning, and then you go to the top of the 9th and you got second and third, now you're not playing to tie the game. You're playing to take the lead, or a bloop single scores 2 and you're up 6-4. And I love Georgia Tech's offense, but I do trust Florida State to get 3 outs up 6-4. Obviously, I'm projecting what would be a perfect scenario. My point being, looking at yourself in the mirror and knowing that maybe this offense isn't capable of a 3 spot or a 4 spot, you should be playing to try and win the game when it presents itself to you. Because to me, it's a little overconfident to be like, we're going to have a 4 spot here. That's not who your offense is, right? Like, that's not who I don't think that you are at this point, at least. That things could change in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. But to me, it's, you have to scrap and claw for every run at this point. You can't leave runs on the table. Does that make sense? Like, you just can't. I know it comes off as like me thinking that that's a little more, you know, in desperation mode, but you are when you're playing Georgia Tech on the road. That's what you have to do, is to try and grind out 1 and 2 run games. And again, it's devil's advocate.
Part of the problem too is you have to pinch hit for your number 2 hitter in that situation. Like, your number 2 hitter needs to be your best hitter in your lineup, and FSU cannot figure out who should be their number 2 hitter. And like, you're in that situation and you're needing to pinch hit for that guy, and now you're putting in someone for their first at bat in the game in like a huge situation. And it's just like, the fact you're constructing a lineup where your number 2 hitter has to be pinch hit for in the biggest moment of the game, and it's a right-handed hitter for a right-handed hitter, so it's not even like, has nothing to do with, and you're not bunting, so it's also not to bring them in for a bunt. It's literally just to swing. Like, when that is your lineup construction currently, like, it's tough to see the light at the end of the tunnel offensively, because it's just not a good offense right now, 1 through 9. Like, it's just not. and they're going to have to pitch and defend at an extremely high level to get where they want to go in the end of the day. But like, and they're going to have to execute at an extremely high level those small things. And like Bradley said, they just didn't do that to the level that Georgia Tech did this weekend.
Yeah, and one thing with the offense too, like you look at the weekend as a whole, and you see the home runs, and then I think you guys were talking about this before. I think they were almost all solo home runs. Like that's not gonna work when you're against an offense like Georgia Tech. You have to just get like a guy on ahead of him, just one guy, and then it's a crooked number. And I think the other thing for me that I kind of expected, but I didn't necessarily expect to this extent. Like you look at Stutzer, Dowd, and Williams. I think they all had 5 hits apiece on the weekend. The rest of the roster had, I think, 5 hits total. And that includes, the 3, I think that includes Fisher's home run, Putnam's home run, and McCulley's home run. So like 3 of those 5 were for extra bases. But like if the rest of your lineup is going 5 for 61, like that's pretty dire. Like that's not going to work. And Georgia Tech has a very good pitching staff. I know the sort of cliche has been around, like they can hit, but they can't pitch. That's kind of changed, as you can tell by the quality of arms they ran out there. Like Patel didn't have his best stuff, but like McKee looked like a Friday starter on most teams, able to, okay, I gave up some runs, I'm going to settle in and still give you 6. Porter Burzma is the best raw stuff on that staff. I mean, he's painting 98, 99. And then I like Blakely. He kind of battled through didn't have his best stuff. But all that to say, like Florida State's lineup, yeah, it's concerning to see that. And I think the talent level at the top is really good. Like I think a Stutzer and a Dowd and a Williams, like when they're all clicking, like that's a group you don't want to face. Like those are good hitters that, Dowd in particular, I love the way he takes an at bat. Like I think he's a very disciplined, mature hitter. But the rest of the group, like there's a lot of swing and miss, and there's a lot of chase, and there's a lot of, okay, like if you're hunting. If you're trying to put up crooked numbers without a ton of power, even though, yes, we saw some power this weekend, you got to get on base in a lot of different ways. And you can't be striking out a ton. You've got to put the ball in play, make defenses work and all of that. So I think that's the one area where it's like, that is a concern moving forward. And I think Georgia Tech's pitching staff is good. But if you're going to make a run in the postseason with the pieces you have, you're going to face pitching staffs better than that. Like you're gonna have to get hits and manufacture runs and stuff, and that's definitely something that it's like, okay, you have a lighter schedule coming up, relatively speaking. You got to prove that you can score in that stretch, or that's just gonna be the narrative the rest of the year. It's gonna be like it's obviously awful what happened to Miles Bailey, but like it's also the reality and how you handle that and how you sort of mix and match guys and figure out who goes where and what your lineup construction looks like. Like I think you got to just throw everything you can, like make as many changes as you can, figure out, test every possible thing you can in these weeks. Cause you're in a really good spot with your record and your series wins and your non-con, like you're in a great spot. Like you're totally safe, but like, you got to get prepared and figure out the right buttons to push is kind of what I see with that offense.
I mean, I think Florida State fans, Bradley, are concerned about if they get into a regional, can they advance out, right? Like that's, the expectation at FSU is what does this look like in June? And I think that's totally fair. And that's part of your point is you got to show that you have ability the next couple of weeks so that people feel good enough about you when you turn the page to postseason. And Brett, I mean, Bradley's right. Like the reality is you don't have Miles, and him and I were there this weekend. Georgia Tech did not play the baseball games like they felt bad for Florida State. That was not a Georgia Tech team that was like, oh, we're playing Miles Bailey-less Florida State. Their fans were on FSU all weekend. They were celebrating like they had won a super region. Like their players, the way they were pumping, like pounding chest and watching Ramsey hug all of his players. And part of it was cool, but part of it was also like they treated it like it was a massive series and statement for themselves. And no matter how we feel on this side of it in terms of, yeah, it'd have been nice if Miles was healthy, that's not how opposing teams view this. This is still Florida State. This is still a marquee series on their schedule. This is still a big opportunity to kind of prove to everybody that you can play at this level. And like Georgia Tech's still trying to, under Ramsey, earn their respect. And I think they have Bradley's respect. They have my respect. They have anybody who covers baseball's respect. But there's still probably a group of SEC fans out there and so on and so forth. They're like, yeah, whatever, Georgia Tech. Yeah, they're nice. They're having a nice season. And they're still trying to prove to people that they belong at this level and this respect that they deserve. And beating Florida State matters. And so, like, I think the rest of the year, you're going to get that from teams when they play Florida State. It's not going to be that's Florida State, but if they had Miles Bailey, it would mean more. Nah, that's not. No one feels bad for you. You've got to figure it out at this point if you're FSU and you want to accomplish the goals that you have set out for yourself.
Yeah, everybody's playing for themselves, obviously, just trying to win every game, and nobody felt bad for them when they lost like 20 straight games in a row 3 years ago, and they were still trying to beat them then. So they're still going to get everybody's best shot, and it's still going to be a tough test the rest of the way because, like you guys were talking about with the depth of the league, like it's not going to get easy per se. It's just going to get easier than what you've had so far. But the fact that you are in the situation that you're in probably means that it's actually not easier because you did have Miles for a lot of that, the first portion, the first really 3 weeks of ACC play. I think you just have to start a new page this week, getting back at home. Starts with Stetson tonight and then into Notre Dame this weekend. And you'll have a really tough test to start the weekend with Raydell for them on the mound, who I think is really, really awesome and someone that can shut down pretty much any lineup in the country. So, yeah, you're going to have to respond, bounce back pretty quickly here because, Stetson's not having the year we're used to seeing them have, but they always give you trouble and you need to get back to it soon. But you are in really good standing with the RPI. It was crazy to still see them at 6. RPI seems to love them this year. Strength of schedule seems to love them. Probably expect the strength of schedule to drop a little bit, I would guess, the next few weeks as SEC teams continue to play each other and other ACC teams start to play the top half of the ACC. But for the most part, you probably feel really good about where your metrics are going to be at for the entirety of the year. So as long as you can kind of just hold your ground and play consistently over the next 5 weeks, I think you're still in a really, really good spot based on the work that you've done to this point, despite an 0-4 week this past week.
Yeah. Bradley, let's talk some Georgia Tech because, that's fresh on our minds. Are they as good as any team in the country? Do they have as good of a chance as anybody of not just making a deep run, but being a true national title contender?
Yeah, for sure. I think if anyone watched like that whole weekend, you see a group. They're all super bought in, obviously, to Ramsey, and that's the easiest assistant to head coach transition you could possibly do because he was the recruiting coordinator. So like these are his guys. He was the hitting guru behind those offenses. So like that's an easy adjustment. And then Matt Taylor and Jason Richmond have just taken a staff that was really inconsistent when they sort of arrived under Danny Hall. And they have sort of built up, that pitching apparatus to the point where it's like, yeah, I feel good about the pitching now. And so you have a high level pitching staff and you have a lineup where like this week's ACC player of the week, Carson Curse, is in their 8-hole. And it's one of those lineups where it's hard to find a reason to put him elsewhere. Like you just look at it. It's like you have Drew Burris hitting leadoff. You have Von Lackey second. You have Jaron Advincula third. Like 3 elite hitters. Then you go Hernandez, Schmidt, Zuckerman, all talented hitters, all with, Schmidt's got really good on base, bat to ball. Hernandez and Zuckerman have good pop. And then it's like, okay, then you go Baker, Curse, and then either Brocious or Daniel. And it's like, that's 10 hitters that would start. Most of them would start on any team in the league, and would be high up in the order. So it's just the depth in the lineup and the buy-in. And I think what impressed me the most was in that final game, it did not matter who Florida State brought out of the bullpen. They'd go huddle, they'd go over the scouting report, and then they would show up and just attack. And it didn't matter if they got behind, it 2 strikes, 2 outs, didn't matter the situation. They just have a very even-keeled, we're going to put the ball in play. And I think what stood out to me too was in, the first 2 games, I think they had the 1 home run. I think it was Baker off of Mendez. Other than that, it was just bat the ball. They just kind of fill up the bases, draw walks, poke a ball into the out. They would create in different ways. And I think that's one of the more dangerous parts. They don't need to hit a ton of home runs. That's one of the cop out, they're just small park, different things like that. No, they can score in a million different ways. And I also think they're sneaky good base runners. They don't steal a lot, but they take the extra base constantly. They're off on the right pitches and the right contact. And they have a really good approach there as well. So I just look at them and see they're easily the most complete team in the league, and it's easy to see that team hosting a regional, hosting a super, and winning, especially with the way the crowd has just really bought in. Like, it was loud. It was loud. They're, the students were just relentless. I felt kind of bad for some of Florida State's guys at points. They really clearly singled out, Chase Williams after that. He just had a couple moments. Like, there's obviously the play at the plate, but then there was like the replay review. He was calling, like, there were a couple moments, and then they just were relentless with him the rest of the weekend. So I think that was, it's just a tough place to play. And I think that, it wears on you. And that sets them up really nicely for the postseason, I'd say.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think the thing, obviously we know about the lineup, like, going into it, but I think what stood out to me was their defense, like up the middle. Like, Lackey, yeah, he is amazing behind the plate, but then also Curse at short was really good. And I thought Avicula at second, and then Burris I've always thought is an awesome defender. So when you have those four guys up the middle of the field, like, I felt like they were both consistent and taking hits away from FSU. So when you combine that with their offense and some depth on the mound, like Bradley was talking about, the completeness of that team is pretty special. And then, yeah, after being there a couple of years ago with Ariya, seeing the crowd the way it was pretty shocking on TV, and it was pretty cool to see. I was pretty excited to see that the Rammers got that going like that in year one for them.
Yeah, I mean, and on to your point on the defense, the corners are remarkably good as well. Like, Zuckerman made a couple highlight reel plays, and he was a good defender at Pitt, but nowhere. I don't think he was that good. And then Schmidt's throw, like, when you narrow in on the game-ending play in the first game, you talk a ton about the base running, but you also have to recognize, in a packed top of the ninth high-stress situation, like, Mason Patel quieted his feet, settled, made it through a dart to first. We've seen pitchers throw that away a million times. And then Schmidt sees the fastest player on the other team booking it home and also delivers a perfect throw. Like, there's both of those throws I've seen. Anyone who's watched college baseball has seen that go terribly wrong. So I think that was a good example of just, like, they're very capable, and they don't really beat themselves. So that was cool to see. And then the crowd, the best part, the Yellow Jackets chant, which I think they must do that at football games. But it was just going back and forth in the biggest spots, and it was really loud.
It was definitely a much different atmosphere. I think Brett and I have gone twice before. And Bradley, I mean, you saw a lot of Noles fans were there too, but it was, in the past, it's been like all the Noles fans would show up, and then it would look like 75% of the stadium is FSU, because Georgia Tech would just have empty pockets of fans in other spots. So to see that built is really cool. I think Georgia Tech being a consistent force is good for the ACC. The ACC needs it. Because we've always talked about the SEC and the depth and the passion of all the different programs, and you start to number them, and you get into the 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 range, right, of teams and programs that really care and invest, not just financially, but emotionally, and with the fan bases. Georgia Tech has always made a lot of sense. They're a hotbed in Atlanta. That is a talent, rich part of the state, and you see SEC teams go in there all the time and go and get a lot of really good players, and off the top of my head, I'm just thinking about, guys like Dansby Swanson and Christian Moore, Atlanta area guys that went to the SEC. And if you can get more of those types of players to go to Tech and keep them home, and a lot of them go to Georgia too, by the way, that would be really good for the league. I think Ramsey's an all-star. I mean, I've always thought that. If the Noles didn't get Link Jarrett, I'm glad they did, but Ramsey was a hot name high on the board of guys that makes a lot of sense for obvious reasons that he played here. But him to get his shot, to get to do it at home for him, where he's from Alpharetta and where his wife is from Atlanta area, that's a big deal. I didn't know his wife was a Georgia Tech graduate. That made a lot of sense. And she actually told me that right after he left Florida State to train and to come back in the off seasons to get ready for his major league season, he would actually work out at Georgia Tech. And so, like, Danny Hall would let him work out at Georgia Tech in the off seasons. And so that relationship naturally built, and that's really cool to see. Tech's a power. I want to see them do this year in and year out. It was really cool. This is most of Ramsey's core, right? That he recruited as the coordinator for for Danny Hall, right? He got to keep all these kids. I heard a lot of the kids had said, if you guys choose anybody other than James Ramsey, we're going somewhere else, or we're just following him to wherever he gets his next shot. So everyone at Georgia Tech got that right. They are now reaping the rewards. Tech's just got to finish. You just got to go into postseason, and you know, when the microscope gets in on those and there's a spotlight on that weekend, you can't make mistakes. That can't be the weekend for you to not be your identity for the that you've shown the rest of the regular season. So that's going to be the next step for Tech is, all right, now you're at this stage, prove that you can handle the moment and the expectations and maybe some weight on your shoulders of people expecting you to make a deep run. That's going to be the next step, obviously, for a bunch of kids who haven't been there. Like, that's the truth. Those kids haven't played at that level yet. So maybe you lean on guys like a Dylan Loy who has played at that level, and so on and so forth of guys. But, man, I love their team. Relentless. Bradley, you're right. They don't have to hit home runs, which I think, people always associated Tech with gorilla ball, right? Danny Hall's going to hit. His teams are going to hit over 100 home runs every year, and they're going to get to the regionals and flame out. Like, that was always the narrative about them. But this group, they'll sing. I mean, Von Lackey happy with a backside hit, Alex Hernandez happy with a backside hit, and then when their opportunities come to be able to take advantage of a mistake pitch, they will drive it 400 feet. They have that patience, and to me, that's impressive to be able to buy in to all of that, right? And to be able to buy into what James Ramsey's preaching. And I don't think I've seen another head coach, Bradley. You tell me, you cover more of the ACC than I do on a day-to-day basis. Is there any other coach who's that locked in and involved with every at-bat and every pitch? He's at third base. He's got the helmet on. He calls offensive timeouts more than anyone I've seen do it, which, honestly, if you're allowed to do it, do it. But he'll walk halfway down, powwow with it's like once an inning. You're like, this is actually kind of cool. And he's like locked in and clapping his hands and getting guys involved. I don't think I've seen anyone that involved as a head coach on a pitch-to-pitch basis with his team.
Yeah, I think I don't think anyone's as energetic as him, like just so pumped up about, during plays and stuff. I think the closest comp is actually T.I. Todd Interdonato at BC. He's got the helmet down the third base line. He's involved. He'll call everyone in too. It is interesting to see like the different approaches. Like some coaches Ramsey in particular, it's like they do so much prep, so much scouting, so many different like scenarios and game plans, and like they're obsessed. Like that's just all they are. And I know every coaching staff is like this, but they in particular, like those meetings, sometimes it's just to quickly reset a guy. And it looks like it's this big discussion, but like the Carson Curse at bat, Ramsey was talking about after the game, where it was just like he chased, I think it was O'Leary, he chased an ugly swing on a curveball low and away. And so he calls an offensive timeout, and Curse is like, looks confused and doesn't really need anything. And all he does is just like, he goes up to him, he's just like, all right, let's just calm down. Doesn't give him any tips or advice or any, it's just, hey, take a breath. And then Curse goes up, takes a pitch, and then laces like a 2-run single. And it's like, okay. Yeah, like he picks his spots. He sees if someone's pressing. He sees like if Lackey's out in front of something, and he'll just take them. And it's just like, it's interesting to see how involved he is. I do think one last thing on them that'll serve them well is last year's regional. It's this same group of guys, really. Like they added Advincula, they added Zuckerman. There's some new faces on the mound, obviously, but it's the same core. Like they all wanted to host. They were the ACC regular season champions. And I think that's also, when you look at how big this series was, they didn't get to play like a lot of the teams around them in the standings last year. And then they had to hear constantly about that, where it was like, oh, you like didn't play any of the, you played like one of the top four. Like, sure, you won the regular season, but you didn't play anyone. And that was kind of the recurring knock on them. So I think they're kind of out for it. And I think Florida State was like one of those teams like right there with them last year. So yeah, they're a wagon, and I just think they're built to go very far this year.
I made a comment that I thought there was maybe 5 SEC teams that I would have took coming into the weekend over Tech, and this was after the Thursday game. And then I left Saturday and was like, I texted Bradley, I'd like to formally retract that statement. They're really good. They have more depth on the mound than you think, and their defense, as Brett said, is outstanding behind it. And then they are the best offense in the country, and there's a lot of stats that would tell you they're the best offense in the last 15 years since the modern update to the BB core, right? And the changing of the bats. We haven't seen these types of numbers in a long time, especially at the P4 level and the depth of that. It's crazy, Brett. I was thinking, like, how many of FSU's players would be in that lineup? Like, this lineup without Miles, like, I don't doubt, maybe. I don't know. Like, that's a legitimate question, and that's not taking anything away from Florida State. They have some serious talent, but like Tech's having issues trying to figure out which 12 or 13 they can get at bats to on a daily basis because of the depth that they have. Yeah, they're really good. Let's put a pin in on Georgia Tech, Bradley. Last thing I want to ask you about them, and maybe you can transition this into a bigger picture ACC thought too, as we wrap and push back to Florida State for the final few minutes of this episode. How much are you looking forward to Carolina Tech this weekend in Chapel Hill? To me, that's another opportunity for Tech to make a statement because UNC, similar to Florida State, good pitching staff, offense is opportunistic, but they're going to have – now Georgia Tech's going to have to do this on the road, right? In Chapel Hill, at the Bosch, great atmosphere there too. Different type of test for Tech on their season. How do you foresee that weekend? What are you looking for? And give us a quick picture of the ACC as we wrap this one up.
Yeah, I think that series is, location aside, very similar to this Florida State series. Like, it on paper, it looks similar. North Carolina's lineup has been better, and I think there's a lot of good pieces in there that are hitting well. Like, you look at an Owen Hull and a Gavin Gallagher, but their bread and butter is pitching, and it's not a lot of pitchers, much like Florida State. Like, you look at the circle of trust, so to speak, with North Carolina, and it's their three horsemen in the rotation, and then it's Caden Glauber and Walker McDuffie, really. Like, those two threw 12 innings this past weekend, and obviously they had an extra inning game in there, but they really had to scratch and claw to get past Clemson. And I think Georgia Tech is going to approach this the same way. Like, maybe they're not slugging a ton, but they're going to make those pitchers work. And, for a guy like Jason DeCaro, top North Carolina's rotation, like, he hasn't had a ton of swing and miss this year. And that's one of those things where it's like, they're going to hunt, their pitches. And it could end up playing out similar to what we just saw. But I do think Georgia Tech's on like kind of a path to just keep making statements. And I think whatever happens this weekend is the same as sort of for Florida State, where it's like, if you lose the series to Georgia Tech, you're okay. Like, everyone is kind of doing that, obviously. Like, they have not lost a conference series. They've not lost a weekend. And then I think the ACC as a whole is so interesting because of how crowded it is after sort of those top two. Like, you just get into a cluster of who's going to be in the top four for a double bye. That's incredibly valuable because you have obviously a shorter path to an ACC title game, and you get to play better teams at the tournament in terms of RPI. So it's the double bye, then the next four for the single bye. And so there's just so much jostling that we're heading into that stretch where it's like, you can't drop games. Like, if you're home, you got to win your weekends. If you're on the road, you got to take a game. And it's going to be tough for predicting how this plays out. But I do think there's just so many good teams that we'll see these seesaw weeks where it's like a Cal and a Stanford and some of the other teams like Miami who rise up and then fall down, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. I'd say. Yeah,
the depth of the league is on full display, and I can't wait to watch that series this weekend. Bradley, we appreciate you, my man. You're welcome to stay on for the final 10 minutes, but I know you got a lot on your plate, so if you peace out here, we won't be mad at you. We appreciate you, and we'll have you back on Sunday Golds very soon, my man.
All right, I'll hop off. Thanks for having me, guys.
That is Bradley Smart of D1Baseball.com. Brett, all right, as we pivot to the final 10 minutes of this pod, let's talk the week ahead. Stetson's not easy, but this group right now really needs some good news, man. Like, I think this group needs a win badly. However it comes, to get back on the positive side of all the good vibes and energy and momentum. I really feel like overall you need a 3-in-1 week when you look at Notre Dame and Stetson to just try and right the ship a little bit, and for us to be able to pivot the conversation back to, can the Noles continue to evolve and get to where we want to go by the end of the season and peak at the right time? But yet, also have the resume that's worthy of hosting as a top 16.
Yeah, I mean, even though you had that 3-1 week, right after the injury and what happened, like you're still 3-6 since Miles went down. So you do need some good mojo to get going here, and this is a good week to do it, a good opportunity to do it. Stetson's only 14-21 this year. You beat them earlier this year down in Stetson. Was pretty stress-free game, I would say, especially for what you're used to when going down to the land and playing that team. But you know that you're always going to have to target on your back playing these in-state Florida teams. So you still got to come out and play at a high level against them and pitch at a high level. And I'm sure that will start with Cooper Whited. I was looking for the starters, couldn't find them. I don't know if they've been announced officially, but I would guess that Whited is going to be on the mound again. Last time out, I can't remember exactly. I think it was Sheffield that hit the home run in that game down to left center, or down the left field line. I mean, to get that game going offensively, and we'll see if he's back in the lineup for it. But yeah, this is a week where I think you really hope that you see some hope at least from the lineup and see some consistency of quality at bats. I did think they struck out some less this past week, at least compared to the first couple of Florida games. And then, over the weekend, they had a couple games where they had less than 10 strikeouts. One of those was a game that was shortened to 7 innings. But, there's some things in there that are positive, but, you just need to score more runs. That's the name of the game at the end of the day. And you're not doing that at a high enough level right now. And you just need to produce. This week specifically, you just need to go out and produce at a high level consistently as an offense.
Yeah, I can comment on it is Whited starting, and Phillips will go. Evan Phillips, I believe, or Ethan Phillips. I should probably make sure I get that right before tonight and calling that game. But it's Phillips versus Whited, so that'll be the matchup. Phillips did not pitch against Florida State in the first game this year, but he did pitch against Florida State last year. I want to say the game in Tallahassee. So
23 innings this year, 7.83 ERA, has made 5 starts and 9 appearances.
I think my notes on him, Brett, was that he started as a weekend guy for them first couple of weekends, and he has since it hasn't gone. They're trying to figure him out because Stetson right now is struggling. This is not the same Stetson team, which is weird because they have a lot of familiar names from teams that have had success, but they're struggling. They're like losing a ton of weekends. What's their record right now, Brett? Let me pull up their WAR and Nolan. I was looking at it last night. They are under. Yeah.
14-21 overall. They're 5-9 in the A-Sun so far this year. They're only 3-9 away from home. So been really tough for them when hitting the road to this point this year.
Yeah, they haven't scored a lot of runs. Their offense has struggled. So we'll see. I'd like to see going into this weekend, Brett, guys like Stutz are really taking the next step, right? They showed you the flash of what they can be this weekend in Atlanta. Can you continue on that trajectory and really push forward? I think that for me is another storyline. Can Paulino get going? Can Dowd be a consistent force? Can Carnes really turn into that star for you? And so I think now you're looking for guys to step up and really kind of lock in on their own seasons and their own paths. And I think that begins this weekend in Tallahassee. So I think those are, for me, my keys are 3 or 4 guys need to step up that we can feel good about turning the page from Notre Dame onto the next week. And can you continue to get Wes and Trey? Trey's got to take another step too. Beard's, his stuff's awesome, but now we need him to really hone it back in and attack the zone. And then Bryson Moore, I want to see if he's healthy. Obviously he got taken out battling a little bit of something. And, you do get that extra day back this week. So that's good to go from a Thursday start to a Friday start for a series. Everybody gets pushed back a day, and that could be good, for arm health and getting guys back on track. So that's what I'm looking for. Is there any other storylines that you're keeping an eye on as we move through these 4 games in Tallahassee?
Yeah, I thought despite some of the moments that they got clipped and didn't look great, Chase had a pretty good week and is moving in a positive direction, especially at the plate. And I think if that can be something for you that you feel like good about every day and you feel like, hey, we can put this at leadoff, and then that allows you to put Dowd at 2 or 3 behind him, I feel like it makes your lineup deeper and more capable. So I think that's something I would like to see continue trend in the right direction. Um, Obviously we still haven't seen Gabe Frazier back in the lineup. He has been healthy, fully healthy these last few weeks. And the fact that he has not been back in the lineup, I don't think there's any reason to believe to this point that he will be back in the lineup. Maybe an 0-4 week makes them change their mind on that and they decide to throw him in there. But to this point, I think the way they have handled it has kind of showed you the way they're going to continue to handle it. I think Link probably knows better than all of us what his team needs, in my opinion.
I can touch on it. I have to be careful on how I approach this. Obviously, there are certain ways you have to conduct yourself within the fabric of a clubhouse, and that's baseball. I played soccer. Brett played baseball. Those of you at home, I'm sure have played football, basketball, whatever team sport. There is a certain way you conduct yourself amongst your teammates, amongst the coaching staff. There is a certain code that you have to honor within any culture, locker room, etc. And without getting into details, there's a reason Frazier hasn't played, right? And it's not based on any health. It's not based on ability. It's based on things that are coaches' decisions and the way that they feel like things occur in a clubhouse behind the scenes and the way that someone affects the rest of their teammates and or the baseball team as a whole. No one's greater than the whole. No one's greater than the sum of the parts. And I will say this, I don't mind saying this on record. I think Gabe Frazier is a good baseball player. Could he help this team right now? Yeah, he could. I think he could. Is he an excellent baseball player that's of the level of Miles Bailey? No. And if you're not a superstar like that, you don't get to conduct yourself however you feel like conducting yourself. That's just how I'll say it. That's not your talent level has to be so good if you want to not be the best possible teammate and fabric culture builder. You got to do things a certain way, man, if you want to play. Like, that's just how it goes. And I don't love that his dad has gone to social media to rip the program. I don't love that they're reposting stuff that's negative, like that type of stuff. Like, I have to defend Link here on this. I have to defend the program on this. You can't do stuff like that. Like, it's like, who do you think you are? Like, who do you think you are? You're not a first team. You were not the best player in the SEC last year. You were not the best player at Arkansas. You're not the best player at Florida State. You don't get to just do what you want. And that's all I'll say. I'm not going to get into details. I think I've given you plenty there because I'm sick and tired of honestly hearing people go Frazier this, Frazier that on social media, #free Frazier. Like, it's getting ridiculous. Link Jarrett has coached how many years of college baseball? How many players has he dealt with in his life? He has a better feel for this than any of you on social media. I just want you to know that. None of you have any insight onto what's going on. There's a reason Link Jarrett, who knows that his offense is struggling, has not put him into the game, right? Like, that's all I'm going to say on it, Brett. I think I've said that's as like towing the line as it is. And I'll also finish with, I'm rooting for Gabe. I hope he figures it out, and I hope his career gets back on track, because I don't root against kids. I want the best for all of the players, and he is still a kid. At the end of the day, like, he's in his 20s. Like, Brett, you and I, if we go back 10 years, like, man, we were children, like, he's learning too. And I hope the best for him. And I don't think he's a bad kid, but yeah, this is a baseball team. You got to do what's best for the sum of the parts. No one owes anyone anything at this level. So that's all I'm going to say on that, Brett. And I think we should move past that. That's the last time Brett and I are going to talk about Frazier on this podcast. It's not going to happen again. I don't want any more questions on our podcast of hey, any Frazier news. Stop going to message boards and asking people about Frazier. There are people that are paid millions of dollars that would love to win, and their career dictates them winning ball games. There's a reason. Always is. There's always more that meets the eye. Anyhow, Brett, anything else you want to add as we get to the weekend here, and we try to turn the page?
Yeah, I think we'll talk again before Notre Dame series and recap Stetson. But yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight's game. I think it's a good opportunity for the guys to get back home and show a response, and a good opportunity for a good offensive night. Stetson, not a great team, not super deep on the mound. And yeah, I was looking at their offensive numbers after you mentioned how bad they've been this year. I think they're hitting under 250 as a team. OPS, I think, is just above 700. So you hope no matter who you run out there on the mound tonight after Whited that it's high, that it's very good and high quality, especially coming off the way that the game on Saturday ended with the guys you threw out there, because I would guess that some of those guys will be back out there on the mound tonight. So be interesting to see who maybe you get some freshmen, some innings, maybe you get a Lantigua involved tonight. I think you probably need to be up a comfortable amount to do that. But, I do think this is an opportunity to have a nice response and to get some guys some looks on the mound that maybe we haven't seen in a little bit.
Me too, man. I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, I think pretty good episode here today for us, and got a lot done. And apologize to those of you last week you're looking for a second episode. Just schedules are getting tougher for us right now, and I'm not sure that we'll have a second episode this week.
Make it tough.
Yeah, and I don't know that we may not have the time this week to come back on Wednesday or Thursday, but we'll see if we can get back on here. We'd love to get some more player interviews involved and get guys on base, get guys on the pod, and
like guys on base too.
Would love both, actually. So stay with us on this. We had almost 500 viewers live on this one. That's awesome. Really, really cool. We appreciate those of you listening, guys. Like, I really, really appreciate it. I know Brett does too. You guys have pushed our pod to 200,000 listens. Like, that's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. Back in the booth tonight, me and Chavez, and then back on the weekend, Brett. Should be a lot of fun. Hopefully the Noles offense takes a step forward. I look forward to talking to Link this week in his office about, ideas he has to try and maximize what he's got this year. And so that'll be a theme, I think, moving forward, is how do you get the best out of what you have right now? And how do we talk about some of the parts. When you don't have individual players like Miles Bailey, collectively, you've got to be as bought in as the Georgia Tech players to what James Ramsey was doing, and you've got to have this thing all hands on deck, pushing forward together to kind of win by committee, to use the old Leonard Hamilton saying, we win by committee. So I look forward to seeing how that, evolves this weekend in Tallahassee. But good stuff, man. Good to see you again. Glad we could do this pod. Great to have Bradley Smart back on the pod as well. And do want to thank Alumni Hall and our friends at Metro Deli for being a proud sponsor of Sunday Goals. I think 178 is a wrap. He's Brett Nevitt. I'm Ariya Masudi. This has been Sunday Goals.